After taking his own wife's life in a fit of obsessive jealousy, Ethan drives down the infamous Clinton Road, trying to escape his past. But on that road, the past doesn't stay behind, it follows you. And something out there wants revenge for the innocent blood that was spilled.
It looked like an open wound in the night, and Clinton Road was there, a deep chasm of concrete cutting through the thick, stuffy forests of New Jersey. There were whispered stories about people going missing, seeing ghosts, and always feeling like they were being watched on that road. That being said, for Ethan Graves, it was just a quick way to get somewhere else, a lonely, forgotten road that let him briefly escape a past that wouldn't let go. The air was thick and heavy with the weight of a storm that was coming, but the night was strangely still. There is no wind, so the leaves don't move. There was only darkness and silence. And then, far away, a figure came out of the darkness, stand in the middle of the road by herself. The headlights cast a dim light on her body. A long white dress stuck to her thin body. The fabric moved in a way that didn't seem natural, like it had been made from the mist that coiled along the cracked pavement. Ethan's grip on the driving wheel got stronger. A woman out here, on this road at this time. There was a strong feeling in his gut that something was wrong with the scene. His breath was slow and steady, but his heartbeat was lying to him. It kept pounding in his chest. He was free to drive. His job is to keep moving. He put his foot on the brake, but couldn't move it. The basic desire to run away was pushed aside by the instinct to help. The car stopped rolling. As soon as he stepped out into the cold air, the silence outside made it hard to breathe. He took a deep breath, and his voice rose just above a whisper. "Miss, are you okay?" She didn't answer. The woman stood still, her head tilted down, and long strands of dark hair covering her face. Then, out of the blue, a sound slithered through the night. It was a slow, guttural laugh that stretched out in a way that didn't make sense, like a broken string tune played poorly. Ethan took a deep breath. As the pitch and loudness of the laughter rose, it echoed through the forest like a choir of the damned. Even though his legs felt like they were stuck to the ground, he pushed himself forward and carefully reached out with his hand. The world changed as soon as his fingers touched her shoulder. Strangely, the woman moved very quickly, and her head snapped up to meet his eye. Her eyes, they were a deep, angry red. Not like human eyes, but like embers in a dying fire. They burned into him with knowledge that no human could understand. But it wasn't just her look that made him free. It was the blade that was sunk deep in her chest. The knife was silver and shone in the headlight. Its sharpened edge was stuck in the space between her ribs. It was a horrible sight to see cold steel piercing flesh without any opposition. There was no blood or wound. She was also smiling. A big, artificial smile that made it look like the pain wasn't even there, like she had long since given up on the weight of death. Ethan tripped and fell backwards. He let out short, weak breath. It was instinct, that one. The door slammed shut behind him as he spun around and jumped into the driver's seat. As he searched for the keys, he twisted the ignition so desperately that his fingers were shaking. The car started up loudly. He stomped on the gas pedal, making the tires squeak against the road as the car jerked forward. The headlights shone on the road ahead, which was empty. The woman was no longer there. The air was different, though. It was shaking with a force that couldn't be seen. But what would you do if you were in Ethan's place? Would you stop to help, or would you listen to that gut feeling telling you to run? Let me know in the comment. I'm curious to see how many of you would take the risk. The scream then came. A horrible wail came from the forest. It was so unnatural that it broke through the glass and shook him to his core. It hurt. It was anger. It was something very old that had been waiting for this moment. The voice then came. The voice was low and guttural, and it had a power that didn't belong in this world. "You can't get away from what you did, killer." The blood in Ethan's veins froze. His name was said by her. The road turned, and the darkness around him changed shape and size like a live thing. As the past hit him, his vision became blurry and reality began to bend. He kept thinking about the scene, not as a memory, but as a deep, undeniable truth. While he drove the blade into her chest, the woman below him screamed and slashed at his arm. She split her lips and whispered his name one last time before she stopped breathing for good. Ethan was having trouble breathing. This wasn't a bad dream. It wasn't just a weird thought. It was true. It had been real the whole time. He did not hurt the woman in white. She was much worse than that. Something that was born out of anger, a force that had been around before him and would continue to be around after. She was here to judge him and give him the sentence he had been avoiding for so long. Now, there were no turns or exits on the road ahead. It went on forever. There was only one path that went on forever, trapping him in a cycle that could not be stopped. He heard laughter again, this time from a group of hollow voices talking from deep in the trees and wrapping around him like a noose. After that, the world fell apart. Unknown forces threw the car off balance and into the abyss. The tires lifted off the ground. There was no longer any gravity. Time fell apart. Ethan's throat was sucked dry by the cold void, which pulled him past the edge of the living. His screams were lost in the darkness. Clinton Road didn't say anything. It is waiting for the next soul to come into its grasp. After that, the quiet was unbearable. There was a deep lack of sound that tore at the edges of reality and swallowed up even the memory of noise. The car was gone from under Ethan's feet, and he could no longer feel the driving wheel or the seat against his back. He seemed to have been cut off from everything, floating in an endless void where time fell apart and meaning disappeared like mist in the wind. Then all of a sudden, feeling came back. It's cold. A deep, bone-chilling cold that seeped into his skin and marrow and wrapped like creeping ice around his organs. In the cold air, his breath could be seen swirling like smoke as it came out in rough gasps. He could hear a dull noise in his ears, left over from the force that had pulled him off the road and out of reality. In an effort to clear his eyes, he blinked quickly. Things had changed. The empty highway with broken pavement that went on forever through the scary New Jersey woods was gone. Instead, he stood in a place that didn't make sense. A huge, endless area of fog and dark where strange shapes seemed to be moving and twisting as if they were alive. The air was thick with an old, invisible force that pressed against his skin like a living thing enjoying his company. His heart was racing. It wasn't death. It was even worse. A low whisper moved through the air and wrapped itself around his ears like icy fingers. The voice was broken up and layered, like it was coming from 1,000 hidden mouths at the same time. You don't belong here, but you are. Ethan quickly turned around, but no one was there. There was nothing but mist that went in every direction. He breathed faster as fear rose in his chest like a tide that could swallow him whole. From the fog came a shape. Tall and beautiful, she moved with an unnatural ease that didn't make sense for a person. The white woman. The deep wound in her chest was still shining and hadn't been touched by blood or pain. Her dress billowed around her like live smoke. As she looked at him with those fiery eyes, Ethan realized for the first time that this was not a ghost. Not in the way that the stories said. She was a lot older than that. A lot stronger. She wasn't the only one there. It looked like more people were coming out of the mist behind her and taking shape. Some of them had wounds like hers, slashes across the necks and stab wounds in the ribs, and their faces were frozen in a final look of terror. Some people carried something even worse, getting noticed. When Ethan saw them, his throat got tight. These were faces and memories that he had hidden deep in his mind in order to fit a better version of himself that he could live with. Victim. Some of them had died because he killed them, either out of anger, despair, or a cold, calculated desire to stay alive. Now they were all around him in a hellish crowd, and their empty eyes were fixed on him with something worse than hate. The verdict. Ethan stumbled backwards, and his legs were shaking. "No," he said in a whisper. "No, this isn't real. This isn't." The white woman moved toward her. Her smile was slow and thought out. "Ethan, you've spent your whole life running. From the dead body, from the truth, from the path you paved for yourself with each blade you sank into someone else's flesh." He shook his head really hard. I didn't. Lies. The sound of her voice made the air shake. Ethan got down on his knees. He felt the mist wrap around him and seep into his skin, lungs, and very being. He felt like he was being crushed and suffocated by the weight of the past. When he looked down, his hands were shaking because he was hoping and praying that they were empty. They weren't, though. There was the knife. He saw the same blade stuck in the white woman's chest, the same one that had killed many people before that, and blood was all over it. The breath he took was short, sharp, and scared. He tripped over the knife and dropped it, afraid that it would come to life and hit him where he was kneeling. But the faces and figures got smaller and smaller. The white woman knelt down in front of him and tilted her head back as she looked at him like a specimen in a glass case. "Can you feel it now?" Then she whispered, "The weight of your sin, what you really are." He had tears in his eye. "Please," he choked, and his voice was hard to make out. "Please, She moved in closer. "There is no kindness here." The ground gave way under him. Ethan jumped into the dark. He woke up to the sound of his own scream. He jerked back up, his lungs heaving, and his fingers scratching at the wet ground below him. His mind wouldn't accept where he was for a moment. When he saw it, it hit him like a freight train. New Clinton Road. He came back. A car a few feet away was just idle with the door to the driver's side wide open. The headlights were still cutting through the dark. Now that the mist was gone, the air was thick with humidity. It was like the mist had never been there. Ethan's heart was beating fast in his head. He was still living. He got to his feet quickly, but his whole body was shaking and his breathing was rough. He took a bad look at himself. Not a knife, not any blood. There were no signs that something had happened. Had it? He let out a broken, hollow laugh. He stumbled toward the car and grabbed the door like it was the only thing that could keep him grounded. He had to go. Leave this place. Forget about it. However, a whisper, soft. For a moment, he thought he had dreamed it was that soft. However, when he turned around and looked back at the dark road behind him, she was there, being right on the edge of the headlights' range. Be quiet, waiting. As a reminder, Ethan didn't move. He wasn't able to, because he knew the truth for the first time in his life. You can run, you can lie. There are a lot of reasons why you can hide the past. You will always be found by it, though. And some roads you don't really leave. Each time Ethan took a breath, it was hard because of the heavy weight pressing down on him. The woman in white stood at the edge of the headlight. It was hard to see her, but she was there. It felt like the air around her was warped, like there was a shift in the fabric of reality. It was like she and he didn't belong in this world. Not any longer. His body told him to run, to get in the car, slam the door, and speed down Clinton Road until the nightmare was nothing but a memory. He knew deep down that this wasn't over, though. That awful person would be there even if he drove for hours, days, or the rest of his life. Waiting, looking at, because she was there for more than just. She was a word, taking stock, a force that was as old as the sins that stained his soul. Ethan took a deep breath and clenched his teeth on the car door. His body begged him to run away, but his mind told him not to. His past had caught up with him after running away from it all his life. Slowly, the woman tilted her head, but those fiery eyes never left. Then she did something impossible. She took a step forward. Even though the night drowned out the sound of her moving, he could still feel it in the ground. One more step, one more. Her form became clearer, the details sharper. The way her hair, impossibly dark, curled at the ends as if wet, the way her dress clung to her like it had been soaked through in something far thicker than water. Ethan's breath came faster. He couldn't look away, couldn't move. Her lips open. You remember now. Something that isn't a question. Ethan's body was screaming at him to deny it, fight, and refuse. His throat got tight. He tried but failed. He remembered, that's why. The knife he was holding. The blood was getting thick around his feet. The last few seconds of her life, she looked at him with sadness instead of fear or anger. It was like she knew this was how things would end the whole time. His voice broke, and the words didn't come out right. The white woman walked forward again, and her weight pressed against the air. Speak. The night beat. The trees made a noise. He could feel the road below him shaking and cracking like the top of a frozen lake that is about to break. Ethan took short, rough breaths that made his chest rise and fall. His mind fought against the truth and what was going to happen, but the road had already made up its mind. She had already chosen. When he looked down at them, his hands were shaking because he thought they would be covered in blood again. That's not true. He could still feel it, though. What made it warm and how it stuck to his skin, not coming off no matter how hard he scrubbed it. He had never been freed. Not really. Ethan took a deep breath and spoke in a whisper. I killed her. The world sucked in air. The trees were shook by the wind, which bent their skeleton branches as if to bow down to the confession. The headlights were flickering. The car moaned and sputtered, as if the weight of his words was making it choke. The white woman smiled. Yes. Ethan's knees gave out. His body fell in on itself as he gripped the edge of the car. His heart felt like it had been cut out, and every secret he had ever kept hidden was now out in the open of the night. He didn't wipe his tears away, even though they hurt. There was no reason. The tight, smothering silence went on for a long time. The white woman then put her hand up. Ethan jumped back. She didn't hit, though. Didn't do anything to hurt him. In its place, she pointed. Go past him. Going back to the car, Ethan slowly turned, fear making his stomach knot. He knew what he was going to see ahead of time. When his eyes fell on the figure slumped in the driver's seat, he still let out a weak, broken gasp of breath. It was him. His body was still, his face frozen in fear, and his hands were still holding on tight to the wheel in a death grip. It looked like he had been sitting there for hours because his skin was too pale and his lips were tinged blue. It could be days. It could be longer. Ethan fell to the ground. It was a whispered, "No, no, that's not it. Not possible." With each step, the white woman got closer, and he could just barely hear her. Ethan, you never got off the road. Again, the headlights flickered, making the shapes on the road look all over the place. Something unknown was pulling on the trees, making them sway and grunt. Ethan shook his head really hard. No, I left. I stood here. The woman looked right into his eye. This is where you died. The road beneath him seemed to shift, as if the very fabric of reality had started to unravel. His mind clawed for something, anything, to hold on to. But the truth was an abyss, gaping wide, ready to swallow him whole. And he was already falling. He felt the memories all at once. The scream. The shadow came at him quickly. He couldn't speak because he was so scared as something wrapped around his throat and his body was pulled out into the night from the car. The white woman had never been a sign. She was the one who killed him. Ethan took a deep breath. What will happen next? The white woman cocked her head and thought. After that, she smiled. He was taken by the darkness. The sun rose over Clinton Road the next morning, making long shadows through the trees. There was a heavy scent of the night before in the air, like a silent presence just below the surface of reality. A truck rumbled down the empty stretch of road. The driver was listening to the radio and wasn't paying attention to what was going on beneath his tires. And then, far away, a car. The car is parked by the side of the road with the door open and the engine still going. The driver slowed down and frowned. What the hell? As he pulled up alongside the car, the unease set in. He cut the engine, stepping out carefully. The air was thick, the silence strained. Then he saw him. A man was sitting in the driver's seat and not moving. In the middle of a breath, his lips were slightly parted and his face was pale, looking with wide eyes at something that wasn't there. It was reflex that told the driver to get back in his truck, so he swallowed hard. But he wasn't sure. Moved toward them. As soon as his fingers touched the man's cold arm, a whisper, soft. It was so soft that it could have been made up. You stay on the road. The driver fell back, and his heart was racing. He could feel the air around him getting heavier and choking him. He quickly turned around and ran back to his truck, shaking his hands as he looked for the keys. He was going fast when something far away caught his eye in the rearview mirror. Something being in the middle of the street, wearing white. Grateful. Ethan fell to his knees and gasped for air. His sobs were rough and broken. His sins weighed him down like bars made of his own guilt, making it impossible for him to escape. He held onto his chest with shaking hands, and his mind was crying for a way out that would never come. He had to face his past, the decisions he had made, and the blood he had spilled. They had all come back to haunt him. After that, People laughed. A sound that was so big and scary that it ate everything up. Not only was there laughing, but there was also mockery, judgment, and the voices of the damned singing through the void. The woman in white stood in front of him, her shape changing into something that no one could understand. Her body got longer and changed shape. Her face went back and forth between being beautiful and horrifying, and her limbs stretched and bent in ways that they shouldn't have. It looked like two bright stars were shining in her eyes, and behind her, writhing shadows pulsed and coiled, each one a soft mass of changing darkness. She was no longer a woman. It seemed like she was very old, something from space, a force that was older than time and was wrapped in the pain of those who had been hurt by men like him. She was making fun of him. "There is no forgiveness for you, Ethan." Her voice was like 1,000 screams piled on top of each other, breaking the air. "You knew what you did was wrong, and yet you still did it. You gave voice to your paranoia, to your rage, and in doing so, you became the very monster you feared." When Ethan whimpered, his body shook very badly. "Please," he begged. I swear I do regret it. I was weak, I let my mind." But she laughed even harder, her body stretching way too high above him. Then, with one smooth move, she raised her hands and tore the world apart. There was a gap in the space behind her that was filled with pure, throbbing blackness. It writhed and shook like a living thing. It wasn't just darkness, it was alive. The shadows twisted and coiling like smoke given shape, reaching out hungry. Women. Dozens or even hundreds of bodies, each one showing signs of pain from being slashed, stalked, stabbed, or having their hearts, stomachs, or backs stabbed. These women were killed by their husbands, stalkers, jealous lovers, or crazy people who wanted to take what was rightfully theirs. Their hollow eyes burned with something other than anger, revenge. And there she was, right in the middle of the dam. When Ethan's wife moved forward, he couldn't breathe. She looked just like he remembered her in the last few minutes of her life. Her once warm skin was now pale and lifeless, and the dark gash in her throat where his blade had cut her off for good still showed. But there was no sadness, begging, or love in her eyes now. Only the judge. "No," Ethan gasped, shaking his head fiercely. "No, please, not her. Not her." The white woman, on the other hand, raised her hand. The dead did what they were told. They swarmed him like a wave of revenge, reaching out and clawing with skeleton-like hands and rotting flesh. Ethan screamed as he fought them, swinging his fists all over the place, desperate to fight back and get away, but it didn't work. A sharp blade slashed into his stomach and cruelly twisted. He choked on his own breath and his vision went white with pain. Another blow. A crowbar smashed into his ribs, breaking them into splinters. His body shook. The dead were all around him, and each hit sent lightning bolts of pain through his nerve. They tore at him and pulled him apart like wild animals. The first thing that broke was his right arm. As it was ripped out of its joint, there was a wet, sickening rip. The pain was so severe that it had barely registered before. Then his left leg came next. His vision got fuzzy, and his screams got weaker. His body was broken and wrecked, and blood pooled under him and leaked into the infinite space. Afterwards, the white woman raised her hand once more. The dead stopped. It was hard for Ethan to lift his head. The world was spinning, and his mind was flickering like a burning flame. He felt like he was being dragged, and his broken body was being pushed to his knee. Then, through the pain, he saw her. His wife. She stood in front of him, her face hidden by a mask of silence. In her right hand, she held the knife he had used to kill her. There was blood on Ethan's lips and tears were running down his face. He looked up at her with wide, desperate eyes. He begged, "Please don't do that. Please. I was wrong. I now understand that. I wish I hadn't." His body shook with sobs. "I never stopped loving you." She just looked at him and didn't say anything. The woman in white then spoke. "I am not forcing her to do anything, Ethan." The air moved around. "If she chooses to do this, it is because she wants to," he whispered to his wife. "You don't have to. You can let me go." Ethan turned back to his wife. "Please, just please." She smiled for the first time. A small, sad smile. "I forgive you." Ethan took a deep breath, sobbed in relief, and laughed out loud. He desperately nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you, oh God, thank you, But then, without a doubt. She cut his throat. It was a deep, clean cut through his skin like silk. Ethan gurgled and barely grabbed at his badly damaged throat as hot, thick blood poured freely down his chest. His vision got cloudy, and his body swayed and fell over from the weight of it all. His wife just looked at him with a blank look on her face. Then, in a cold voice, she whispered, "I forgive you, but one life has to be paid for with another. That is the law of retribution." As Ethan's eyes lost their last bit of light, the darkness finally swallowed him whole. The road may be behind him, but what Ethan found there will never leave him. What if I told you he's not the only one who found something, or rather, something found him? The next story is even worse. Click now to uncover another terrifying case that no one could ever explain.